Over to you, Mr. Ray.
Thank you, everyone. We're going live now. I don't know if you were live a few minutes beforehand. My name is Rhys Davis. I'm a barrister based here in London at Temple Garden Chambers. I specialise in international human rights and international criminal law. I've been asked to present this evening and host a talk kindly arranged by the Arab Organisation for Human Rights in the UK. The topic for discussion this evening is, quote, "The authorities' security services is a threat to citizens' lives and freedoms." And the reason that we are, of course, gathered here virtually this evening to have this conversation is because of the killing some 2 weeks ago of the Palestinian activist Nizar Banat, almost certainly at the hands of the Palestinian security forces. We have a panel of speakers this evening who I shall introduce individually when we get to them, but we have a very broad spectrum of speakers, including, and I apologise in advance if I mispronounce any names, including Majdaleen Hassona from TRT, Turkish Television and Radio. We have very helpfully Salma Ashraf from Human Rights Monitor, who will be assisting with translation this evening. We have Ghassan Banat, Nazir Banat's brother, and we also have Wael Abu Nemer, who will be addressing you as well. We all know, I suspect, of the events that have unfolded over the last 2 weeks. We know the limited information that's being given out by the Palestinian Authority. We know the details of the brutal killing, and we also know that there have been widespread protests after the event. The central job of any government of whatever type is to protect the rights and safety of its citizens. The question which is being posed in terms is the Palestinian Authority now an active threat to the safety of its own citizens in light of the shocking events that unfolded 2 weeks ago? I'm going to turn first of all, Majdaleen, to you and ask you to comment on a number of issues. But just before we do, you are a journalist, you are a presenter, you have experience in investigative journalism. You have indeed first-hand experience, as I understand it, of brutality and the detention at the hands of the Palestinian Authority. Do you think that what we've seen over the last 2 weeks represents a turning point in the way that Palestinian citizens view the Palestinian Authority, or is it really no surprise to anyone that they've acted in the way in which we've seen?
I can't hear. You hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, please again the question.
Of course. Do you think that the conduct of the Palestinian Authority comes as a surprise to Palestinian citizens, or is this simply more of the same that we've come to expect from the PA? Majdaleen, can you hear me? Well, I think it seems as if we're having some technical difficulties there. Let me try one more time. Majdaleen, can you hear me? It would seem not. Oh well. Well, we'll see if we can come back to Majdaleen in a few minutes' time. Instead, let me move on to our next speaker, Ghassan Banat, Nizar's brother. First of all, may I say we are, of course, sorry for your loss. Can I just confirm before I go any further whether you can understand my questions in English, or do we need to bring Salma in now to translate?
I understand you, but maybe members need to translate. But I am understand, but I want to speak with Arabic because
Please.
I am
Well,
have a special vocabulary, so I must say in Arabic.
yes, please. Because if you want to go ahead, then please.
Okay, I want to say introduction about my brother Nizar in Arabic. Can I speak with
Yes,
Arabic?
please. Absolutely. Yes, please.
اوكي ثانك يو. مساء الخير للجميع. انا اسمي غسان بنات، انا الشقيق الاكبر لنزار بنات. نحن نعيش في الضفه الغربيه. احنا بس اثنين، غسان ونزار. نزار راح الله يرحمه، بقيت وحيده. كمان مره بشكر الاخوه اللي نظموا هاي اللقاء وهي المؤتمر او الندوه. في البداية حاب أحكي يعني مقدمة عن أخوي نزار، مثل ما حكوا لي التكنيكال إنه معي بس 10 دقائق. أخوي نزار هو الإنسان الفقير، عاش فقيرا واستشهد فقيرا. نزار لديه 5 من الأطفال. أصغر طفل عمره شهر، طفلة عمرها شهر لا تعرف نزار ولا تعي نزار. فيعني كيف يعني بماذا سنجيب هذه الطفلة عندما تكبر لما تقول وين أبوي؟ نزار كان بحب التصوير، بحب مهنة الصحافة، بحب مهنة الإعلام، بحب الرسم، بحب الجبسين، بحب يلف في ربوع الوطن ويأخذ معه يعني مجاميع سياحية وجروبات سياحية. نزار إنسان بسيط. لماذا قتل نزار؟ قتل نزار لأنه دخل بيوت وقلوب جميع أبناء شعبنا. كيف دخل قلوب وبيوت أبناء شعبنا؟ لأنه كان ينتقد الأداء الفاسد للسلطة، الأداء الحكومي. السلطة ليس لديها خطة عمل. كان ينتقد في آخر شيء اللقاحات. اللقاحات هذه كانت فضيحة، انتقدها نزار. انتقد البطالة. نحن لدينا أرقام هائلة جدا من البطالة، 36% على حساباتهم ومعطياتهم من أبناء شعبنا للفئة العمرية من 24 إلى 30 سنة عاطلين عن العمل. نزار كان ينتقد القضاء. كيف ينتقد نزار؟ كان يستخدم فيديوهات، مدة هذه الفيديوهات 2 إلى 3 يطلع يحكي في موضوع ببساطة وبلغة بسيطة وبلغة شعبية، فأقنع الناس، دخل بيوت وقلوب الناس، وأصبح لنزار آلاف المتابعين. هذا الشيء لم يرق لنظام رام الله ونظام السلطة ونظام محمود عباس حتى تشكيل مرسوم الانتخابات. نزار شكل قائمة انتخابية. نزار ليس لديه تمويل خارجي وليس لديه تمويل داخلي. نزار يسكن في بيت في الإيجار، لديه منجرة، عاش فقيرا مات فقيرا. شكل قائمة انتخابية وبل يعني والناس تعاطفت معه. التغى مرسوم الانتخابات. نزار رفع كتاب للاتحاد الأوروبي إنه وقف التمويل عن هذا النظام السياسي لأنه نظام غير ديمقراطي. فإذا نزار كان يبحث عن التغيير الديمقراطي بعيدا عن الفوضى والعنف والقتل والدماء. في ذلك اليوم المشؤوم كان النظام السياسي قد أصدر فتوى بقتل نزار لأنه خائن ولأنه عميل ولأنه بده يقطع الأموال عن الشعب الفلسطيني. كان هذا تصريح بالقتل، وكان هذا الأمر السياسي بقتل نزار. وفعلا في نفس الليلة تم إطلاق النار على غرفة نوم نزار في منتصف الليل، وخرج نزار من بيته وترك زوجته وأطفاله، طفلة عمرها شهر، وذهب إلى منطقة تحت تصنيف سي حفاظا على حياته. أنا كأخوه بدأت العمل مع الأجهزة الأمنية. هل هناك مادة قانونية بدكم إياها من نزار؟ هل هناك تكييف قانوني على نزار؟ ما في. المخابرات لا يوجد، الوقائي لا يوجد، النيابة العامة لا يوجد، لا يوجد أي تكييف قضائي على نزار، لا يوجد أي تهمة على نزار، وبقي في منطقة إسرائيلية، منطقة خاضعة للسيطرة الإسرائيلية شهرين. وفي تلك الليلة كان نزار نائما، دخل عليه 20 جندي من جهاز الأمن الوقائي يقودهم الضابط عزيز التميزي، وهذا واضح بالفيديوهات والتسجيلات، وانهالوا عليه بالضرب. في عندنا 2 شهود من أولاد عمي، معدل أعمارهم 20 ل 25 سنة، 25 سنة، انهالوا عليه بالضرب. كان بإمكانهم يعتقلوه، 20 واحد كان بإمكانهم يعتقلوه، ضربوه بالعتلات بالهروات، نفس الأدوات اللي كسروا فيها الأبواب والشبابيك انهالوا على نزار بالضرب. 17 واحد ضربوا نزار بنفس اللحظات. حاول نزار الوقوف إلا أنهم فتحوا ثمه ورشوه بغاز الفلفل. 3 علب غاز فلفل لقيناها في صدر نزار، 3 علب، كل علبة كفيلة إنها تسيطر على 20 شخص. نزار فتحوا ثمه ورشوا 3 علب غاز في ثمه، 3 علب. هي أدوات الجريمة وجدناها خلفهم، 3 علب غاز الآن مثل هيك، 3 في ثمه. بعد ذلك ربطوا نزار وانهالوا على النزار بالضرب كمان مرة. دخلت الغاز والسوائل إلى رئته، حملوه على السيارة وانهالوا عليه بالضرب جوا السيارة. وأنا راح أزودكم بالفيديوهات اللي جمعناها من كاميرات الشوارع، ويبدو أن نزار قد قتل في السيارة رحمه الله. مدة العملية كانت 6 دقائق، كان نزار منتهي. بعدها راحوا فيه على جهاز الأمن الوقائي، لم يستمر في جهاز الأمن الوقائي إلا دقيقتين، لم يستقبله أحد. 100 جثة هامدة، هربوا به إلى أرض خالية. بعد 1.5 ساعة ما عرفوا شو بدهم يعملوا، راحوا فيه على مستشفى عالية الحكومي، كان منتهي بعد 1.5 ساعة. ثم بعدها أطلق المحافظ أو حاكم الخليل أو عمدة الخليل بيان صحفي، بيان على موقع المحافظة أن نزار قد توفي بنوبة قلبية. طيب، بدون هيدر، بدون فوتر، بدون ختم، بدون توقيع، without header, without footer, without stamp, without signature, without date, without number. Look, I will be sent to you after this meeting. بعد ذلك وضعنا طبيب للتشريح. كان التقرير بيقول توفي في ظروف وفاة غير طبيعية نتيجة لدخول السوائل وامتزاجها بالدم وتهتك في القفص الصدري والرئتين. هذا التقرير التشريح، ما في عنده مشاكل لا بشرايين ولا بقلب ولا إلى آخره، ونحن موافقون على هذا الموضوع. اتصلنا في مؤسسات، بدي أسلم الجثمان عشان أدفنه، لم يسلموه إلي، وأنا هاي بطلب تثبيتها وبشكل قانوني. أنا غسان بنات ووالده خليل بنات، حتى هذه اللحظة نحن لم نستلم جثمان نزار بنات. نحن بشكل قانوني لم نستلم جثمان نزار بنات، سلموه لبعض الأقارب إلينا في منطقة إسرائيلية، وكان المطلوب دفن نزار ليلا. أؤكد للمرة الثالثة بشكل رسمي، أنا لم أستلم جثمان نزار، وأنا الأخ الوحيد له، وأبي لم يستلم جثمان نزار بنات. سلموه لبعض الأقرباء من أجل دفنه ليلا. ولكن إحنا سيطرنا على الموضوع ودفناه ثاني يوم بقصة طويلة لا مجال لشرحها. لم يتعاطى معنا أي إنسان. شكلوا لجنة تحقيق من 5. انسحب ممثل حقوق الإنسان الدكتور عمار دويك، انسحب نقيب المحامين وهو منهم، انسحب من اللجنة، وانسحب الطبيب. من بقي؟ بقي 2 في اللجنة: وزير العدل وهو أحد المتهمين سياسيا بقتل نزار بنات، والاستخبارات العسكرية. 2 من 5. رفضنا التعاطي مع هاي اللجنة، رفضنا كل نتائجها، وما زال قتلة نزار في مكاتبه، وما زال قتلة نزار في مكاتبهم. ومن هنا أتمنى على الحضور الكرام مساعدتي كأخ للضحية أن أصل إلى برلمان الاتحاد الأوروبي من أجل أن أقول الحقيقة، ولدي من الشهود 2 كانوا مع نزار بالغرفة. أتمنى عليكم مساعدتي أن ألقي كلمة في برلمان الاتحاد الأوروبي لشرح تصرفات السلطة والتي جاءت كنتيجة لاتفاقيات دولية، وأنا جاهز للسفر إلى أي مكان تريدينه برفقة الشهود الذين كانوا مع نزار من أجل شرح قضية. كذلك أطلب السير بإجراءات دولية تجاه هذه السلطة. لا نشعر بالأمان، لا نشعر بالطمع قبل هذه الزمرة. نزار ليس القتيل رقم 1، نزار رقم 38. هنالك 37 شخص قتلوا في سجون سلطة رام الله. نزار رقم 39. لا يوجد قضاء، لا يوجد أي احترام لحقوق الإنسان. الناس اللي طلعت تتظاهر في رام الله وفي الخليل وفي بيت لحم تم ضربهم، اعتدوا على البنات، سحلوهم من شعورهم، أخذوا تلفوناتهم، اعتدوا على الصحفيين، وما زالت المطاردات الأمنية حتى هذه اللحظة. إذن هذا نظام بوليسي. يجب إزالة هذا النظام السياسي. يجب أن نطمئن على مستقبل أبنائنا وبناتنا في المستقبل. وأنا آسف إذا أطلت الحديث. أنا لي مطلب واحد: أن أذهب للبرلمان الأوروبي برفقة الشهود لتقديم روايتنا كاملة، وأنا أطلب مساعدتكم جميعا أن نبدأ بإجراءات حقيقية على أرض الواقع في المحاكم الدولية، محكمة الجنايات، محكمة لاهاي، منظمات حقوق الإنسان، منظمات المجتمع المدني، من أجل تحقيق العدالة حتى ينام نزار آمنا مطمئنا. وشكرا لكم، وآسف على الإطالة.
Ghassan, thank you for that. We can, just to, I'm sure everyone's realized this, we can see there's an English translation in the chat box at the side of the screen. And Salma, thank you for translating. Ghassan, it's absolutely harrowing evidence that you give, and we're so sorry to hear the tale that you unfortunately have to tell us. May I ask you just 1 or 2 questions? And Salma, could I ask you perhaps to translate? What assurances, Ghassan, have the Palestinian Authority given you, and do you believe that they will carry out a fit and proper investigation?
هو بيسأل حضرتك التأكيدات التي السلطات الفلسطينية وما هو دليلكم أنهم هم من قاموا بهذا العمل؟
دليلنا من قاموا بهذا العمل أولا كاميرات الفيديو، ثانيا هؤلاء الأشخاص دخلوا بزيهم الرسمي وهذا موثق، ثالثا جميع الأشخاص الذين دخلوا لقتل نزار معروفين لدينا لأنهم جميعهم من مدينة الخليل وسكان الخليل، ولدينا علاقات اجتماعية معهم، يعني كانوا يجوا عندنا على بيوتنا في العزاء في العرس والى اخره. احنا مدينه الخليل مدينه صغيره وجميعنا نعرف بعض يعني، فهم معلومين لدينا موثقين وواضحين، وانا جاهز لتقديم الصور الشهود واشرطه الفيديو، وهم بالمناسبه لم ينكروا
يعني في الكاميرات وفي الاشخاص الذين دخلوا بزي رسمي وايضا صور
وشهود.
كان اوكي
شهود مع النزار بنفس الغرفة.
نعم. So he's saying that recordings, the TV camera recordings, and these people who were torturing him, they went in uniform and they tortured him, and there are two eyewitnesses who were with him and they're ready to give their statement. That's how he knows that it's the PA who killed him.
And do you believe that the PA will properly investigate this?
هل تعتقد أن السلطات الفلسطينية بالفعل ستقوم بالتحقيق في الموضوع؟
لا أعتقد أن السلطات الفلسطينية سوف تقوم بتحقيق عادل وشفاف ونزيه، والدليل على ذلك أن السلطة الفلسطينية حتى هذه اللحظة لم تشكل لجنة تحقيق تحتوي على محامين مختصين في الجنايات، تحتوي على قاضي مستقل، تحتوي على خبراء عسكريين لهم علاقة بسير الإجراءات العسكرية والأمنية في الاعتقال. اللجنة مكونة من 2، واحد منهم استخبارات عسكرية، ورفضوا إعطاؤنا حتى الآن، رفضوا إعطاؤنا نتائج التشريح بشكل رسمي وموثق، ورفضوا إعطاؤنا نتائج التحقيق وفشلوا في هذا. ونحن يعني الجناة ما زالوا في مكاتبهم ورأيناهم بأم أعيننا، لا بل وضعوا حراسات على بيوتهم.
Okay, he's saying that that his proof that it's the PE who committed the serious crime is that until now they haven't formed an independent investigation committee from independent and specialized lawyers or an independent judge or military experts that have experience or that are aware of the arrests. Until now, they refuse to give us the autopsy report, and they refuse to give us the investigation report until now. Moreover, those who committed the killing are now in their offices and they're carrying out their work, and they also placed security on their houses for their protection.
It's distressing to hear that. Ghassan, can I say thank you again for taking the time to speak to us? It would be great if you could stay and listen to the rest of the contributions. What I'd like to do now, if I may, is see if we can bring in Majdaleen Hassona. Majdaleen, I can see that you've rejoined us. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Thank you. We were having some technical difficulties before. Would you like to speak in English, or would you prefer to speak in Arabic?
I prefer speaking Arabic.
Fine, okay. Well, in which case, may I just briefly pose a question to you? How is it possible that we keep seeing this sort of behavior from the Palestinian Authority.
تمام. سأتحدث بالعربية عذراً لكي أستطيع إيصال المعلومة بشكل أوضح. في البداية نترحم على روح الشهيد نزار بنات صديقنا، وهو كان مدافع عن حقوق الإنسان ومدافع عن كل فلسطيني حر وشريف. قضية اغتيال نزار بنات كشفت حقيقة الحريات الصحفية في فلسطين. سأتحدث عن هذا الجانب بالذات لأنه بعد اغتيال نزار بنات خرجت العديد من المظاهرات تطالب بالتحقيق في قضية اغتيال وكشف القتلة، وهذه المظاهرات كان يلزمها تغطية إعلامية، ولكن تم منع التغطية الإعلامية وتم قمع الصحفيين بشكل عنيف جدا. نحن تعرضنا للضرب، تعرضنا لمصادرة معداتنا وتكسير الكاميرات ومصادرة الهواتف، تعرضت الصحفيات والمحاميات للتحرش الجنسي، تعرضنا لكافة أشكال العنف. ومع الأسف يعني لا يوجد لغاية الآن من يأخذ لنا حقنا. في إحدى المظاهرات نزلنا إلى الميدان لنغطي، كنا محاصرين في الميدان ومنعنا من التغطية، وكان هناك قمع شديد للمتظاهرين على الأرض، كان هناك قمع لكل شخص ينادي برحيل السلطة الفلسطينية أو تحقيق نزيه وشفاف بقضية نزار بنات. فبالتالي واقع الحريات الإعلامية في فلسطين هو واقع سيء جدا، ومع الأسف الآن تحاول الحكومة الفلسطينية تحاول التواصل مع الصحفيات اللواتي تم ضربهن. يعني مثلا هناك صحفية فيحاء خنفر تقريبا كسرت يدها، هناك شعر في يدها، هناك صحفية ضربت بشكل مبرح، هناك صحفية أخرى تم انفجرت قنبلة في وجهها وتعرضت لإصابة في وجهها. هناك صحفيات يعني حاولوا اعتقالهن، هناك صحفيات أدلينا بشهادتهن إلى الهيئة المستقلة لحقوق الإنسان ومنظمات أخرى وتعرضنا للتحرش الجنسي، وهذا شيء خطير جدا. ليس فقط صحفيات وإنما حقوقيات، مثلا المحامية ديالا عايش أول أمس تم الاعتداء عليها أمام مقر الشرطة وتم التحرش فيها. فبالتالي يمكن القول أن واقع الحريات الإعلامية والحريات بشكل عام في فلسطين سيء جدا ومن سيء إلى أسوأ، وهذا إنذار خطير لنا. لذلك نحن توجهنا قبل فترة إلى المفوض السامي للأمم المتحدة وطلبنا حماية دولية. نحن صدقا كفلسطينيين وكصحفيين بحاجة لحماية دولية من أجل الحصول على حقنا بالتغطية. ونحن بعد اغتيال صديقنا نزار بنات نحن نخشى على أنفسنا، نحن نخشى على أنفسنا من الاغتيال ومن القتل ومن الاعتقال ومن كل شيء ممكن أن يحصل حقنا، وهذا فعليا ما قد يحصل، لأن هذا ما حصل مع نزار وما حصل مع قبله من العديد من الشباب الفلسطينيين في السجون الفلسطينية.
Like what she said to you.
Yes, please, yeah, thank you.
First of all, she thanked you and she prayed for Nizar, and she said that he was a great human rights defender. He was an honest man, and the crime, his murder, actually revealed the crimes that are happening against journalists in general. She also mentioned that after his killing, many people went in protest and they tried to, where they asked for investigation into his killing and revealing the truth. However, these demonstrations were cracked down and people were beaten up, including herself. She was beaten and the camera was taken, and the female journalists also were subject to violence and sexual violence as well, sexual harassment. And they didn't find anyone to help them. One of the female protesters, she was attacked, and the other one had her arm broken, and she's saying that they were always prevented from delivering the voices of the people or recording the protests. For anyone who's calling for investigation into this crime, or for those who call for the removal of the current PA regime. She's saying that that one also the female protesters. She had a bomb that exploded in her face, which is very unfortunate. And there are also other journalists, female journalists, who gave their testimonies to human rights organizations, and they also faced sexual harassments and violence. She mentioned that the freedom of the press in Palestine is moving from bad to worse, and this is a very alarming situation. She said that they went to the UN and they requested, as journalists, to receive international protection, because after the killing or the murder of Nizar, everyone is literally under the threat of being killed, arrested, or being bombed. There is no any kind of protect for the journalists working in Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you both for the translation. Also, thank you, Majdaleen, for your contribution. Before I move on to our next slated speaker, I just want to say welcome to Edward Joseph, who I can see on the screen. Good evening, Edward. Thank you for joining us. I don't want to put you on the spot, although I'm probably about to put you on the spot. If you want to make a contribution, of course, it would be most grateful. For those of our viewers who don't know you, Edward is a foreign policy specialist at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Edward, one of the things that is striking to me as an observer of the current situation and of this killing is it seems to be the latest in a long line of thuggish behaviour by the PA to its own citizens who criticise in ways which in most other countries would not elicit this sort of response. There has, however, been what seems to be a real groundswell of public opinion against the PA in light of this particular killing. Do you think that this means that we're going to see any substantive change in the way that the PA acts towards its citizens, or will it just be more of the same?
Hello there, Mr. Davies. Very nice to be with you. Sorry, they're getting some audio feedback there, but Mr. Davies, very nice to be with you and the other guests here. I've just joined your very interesting discussion, and I'll be having to drop off here to attend to affairs here in Colorado, where I happen to be speaking to you. I see the name Ghassan Banat up there, and if he is a relative of the slain activist Nizar Banat, I would like to extend my condolences to Mr. Banat and to all the entire family of Nizar Banat. And we're very sorry, and our thoughts are with you at this difficult time. And I would say to you, Mr. Davies, you ask a great question. Will there be any change? Will we see any change? And the answer, of course, is we don't know that. I would say it depends on a few different things. Number one, and most importantly, it depends, I believe, on the Palestinian citizens and the Palestinian polity and how they react. Will this be a trigger that ignites a sustained protest and demand for proper accountability among the Palestinian Authority, or will it fizzle out? And that, I think, probably the speakers that you have on this event can share some valuable insights about that, and indeed tell us about how Palestinians feel about this. Are they really furious about this and see this as sort of the last straw for them to tolerate, or are they jaded and cynical, like in many citizens in other parts of the world, who, including in the Middle East, in Lebanon, for example, where people are just simply fed up. We saw in many other countries, right next door, though, Lebanon is a very good example after that terrible explosion that happened in Beirut that killed so many people, that was due to basically to incompetence and probably corruption in the judicial system. And people also for a time were, it ignited for a period, but not really a sustained period, a expression of complete and utter frustration about the leadership there, that they would tolerate such a thing of storing massive explosives in a port area. All of these things we see. Corruption is a terrible scourge that has massive implications. And one encouraging thing I can just say from here in the US is that President Biden has made the fight against corruption, he stated this just recently, he's made this a national security priority for the United States, is the fight against corruption. And I think the killing, the tragic killing of Nizar Banat has caused a reaction. I saw that the US, the EU, and others have called for justice and called for a thorough and proper investigation. And I think we need to know what was this result of this report that was investigation that was apparently done by the Palestinian Authority that was in the possession of the Justice Minister. What does it say? That's sort of an initial step, that kind of a question. But in terms of the reaction by the Palestinian Authority itself, well, I don't know that we have reason to be terribly optimistic. Again, I think the largest part of this is really in the hands of Palestinian citizens and also those who support the Palestinian Authority, like the US, the EU, and others, to say, look, you have to be accountable to your citizens. And when an activist is taken into custody and subsequently dies, that's unacceptable, and there has to be full accountability about what happened. Please.
Thank you very much. That's very kind, and I do apologize for putting you on the spotlight. That I should also say
okay.
That
it's a good question. It was a great question you asked.
Well, it occurs to me that obviously the initial response from the Palestinian Authority has been more of the same. It was to stonewall initially, and certainly from what I've read, and indeed from what we've heard from Ghassan before you came on, who is Nizar's brother, there has been investigators. It is an organization investigating itself, and of course that is antithetical to justice, and people who are implicated in the killing remain in post. And these are things which are wholly at odds with the rule of law. So from the Palestinian Authority, my observation is that at the moment seems as if it is more of the same. It is encouraging that we've heard some criticism from both the EU and the US and other international bodies, but there's no doubt whatsoever that the attack was linked to Nizar's call that the EU should stop funding. And it seems to me that if that is the background to this, then it places a particular burden on the EU to stand up and say something about this. And one thing which occurs to me, certainly from a legal perspective, is that I wonder if, and it is a cynical view, but if what happens is the Palestinian Authority tries to just ride this out, as they often do, is if there are international legal mechanisms that can be brought to bear on the Palestinian leadership. And one thing which occurs to me as a potential route to justice would be the imposition of Magnitsky-type sanctions on the individuals who carried out this killing or who authorized it, if there is no proper route to justice domestically. And of course, if the PA surprises us and holds a fully transparent investigation which meets basic international standards, and that there are individuals who are convicted of this, then that would be unnecessary. But if that doesn't happen, then I think there is an obligation, a moral obligation on the EU and indeed on the US authorities as well to take those sorts of steps.
I think that's it's quite interesting suggestion there, Mr. Davies. Here's, for what it's worth, this is the way I would see, and if I were speaking to a US or EU official, what I would recommend. I would see what you just suggested as a step down a road, not the initial step, but a potential step down the road. The first step is to see the report. There apparently was some investigation done, and we speak about rule of law. So we have to give the Palestinian Authority the opportunity to demonstrate that it is functioning under its law and functioning as a proper authority. So apparently, so reportedly, so I see BBC reported this, that there was some investigation done, but the report hasn't been made public. So number one is for the US and EU to say, and for, of course, and whenever I speak, I'm going to remind everyone that the number one voice here is really the Palestinian citizens themselves. But speaking here as an American, it's the US and EU should say, hey, we need to see that report. That report needs to be publicly released. Release it. And then one of two things will happen. Either the Palestinian Authority will release the report, in which case then US, EU, and Palestinian citizens together, they can process and read it and see if it's satisfactory. Or they will refuse to release the report. Or the report will be released and be seen to be as a sham report. So in either of that case, then we come to the next step. Let's say they refuse to release the report or it's seen as a sham. Then it's very clear the US and the EU and guided, I think, again, in large part by the Palestinians. Let's see if there are protests about this that are sustained, where people demand to have a proper inquiry and investigation. There may be a call, if the citizens may ask, for an independent inquiry. That's often something that's done where there's a refusal. There's a clear suspicion about official complicity in such a terrible act. There's often a call, demand for a impartial inquiry. You know, let's be clear here. Israel has been the object of demands for UN inquiries many times for killings of Palestinians. So why not the Palestinian Authority? Perhaps the UN could be asked to come in, and that could be presented to the Palestinian Authority. Say, hey, you demand all the time that UN to investigate Israel. Well, in this case, how about having the UN conduct its own independent investigation? So that's another step short of the very strong but interesting suggestion of Magnitsky sanctions. But then, even before, you play that out, and if there's still resistance or apparent complicity and nothing is done about it, you have the very option that apparently Mr. Banat was proposing himself, which is cutting off EU funding. So even before you got to the level of sanctions, which is a higher, and it involves a longer and more deeper consideration to apply sanctions. But even if before that, it's a much simpler process to do, ironically, what Mr. Banat was advocating, which is simply to cut. You can reduce, you can cut back. That's inherent, and that's not difficult to do. That doesn't require any sort of heightened process or crossing certain thresholds of investigation and so forth. That can be done on the basis simply of a apparent lack of cooperation and follow through and accountability, and the EU and the US, either or both, can say, look, this type of posture falls below the standards that we expect when we donate our money, and therefore we're going to cut back. And ironically, it would bring about the very consequence that the Palestinian Authority may have been, we don't know for sure, of course this is speculation, we don't know for sure, was trying to prevent, possibly, again, allegedly, possibly, because we don't know, perhaps by the killing of Mr. Banat. So by killing Mr. Banat, it's ironic, it could bring about the very consequence that potentially, possibly, some officials were trying to avoid.
Yeah, there may be a sort of grim irony about that. And again, as an observer, one thing that occurs to me is that the response of the PA in this case and in many others, in a way, is not focused. It's not thought through. It's often merely lashing out at criticism because they're simply unable to process that in a rational way. But whatever happens, it seems to me that there are a number of pressure points which can be pressed and applied to ensure that the Palestinian Authority adheres to its own laws, because it's worth emphasizing, it's not the Wild West. I mean, there are Palestinian Basic Law outlaws this activity. Palestinian Basic Law enshrines the right to free speech with some limitations. And the Palestinian Authority is a signatory to the International Covenant on civil and political rights. So it is not simply a case that they are making it up as they go along. There are rules and there are mechanisms, it seems to me, that international organizations and third parties should use to make sure that they adhere to their own laws. Edward, thank you once again. And I'm very, very grateful for your contribution. What I'd like to do now, please, is move on.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Thank you. And again, if you'll permit me just to close, again, my condolences there to Ghassan Banat and Mr. Banat, to your family, and to the late Nizar Banat's immediate family as well. And a reminder that I think in the end, this is really in the hands of Palestinian citizens, and that I hope, again, that they would see that it's really a requirement for citizens themselves to demand rule of law and accountability from their leaders, and hopefully to recall what happened in Lebanon, and to see that unless it's sustained, as it wasn't tragically in Lebanon after the terrible explosion in the port, then the results won't be there. But I'm wishing folks there all the best. And thank you, Mr. Davies.
Thanks, Edward. If I can now bring in Wael Abu Nema, and apologies again if I mispronounced that at the outset. Wael is a Palestinian lawyer and human rights activist, and I believe head of department at the Al-Haq Center for Applied International Law, as well as a law lecturer and a former legal advisor to the Norwegian Refugee Council. Wael, would you prefer to speak in English or in Arabic?
I would like to speak in English so that I'll save you the translation.
Thank you.
First, I would like to say good evening to everybody. Masal khair in Arabic to everybody. And I would like to speak a few words in Arabic to Ghassan. عزيزي غسان، تعازينا الحارة باغتيال شقيقك نزار. أنا تعرفت على شقيق نزار الصحيح من خلال ابني الكبير، كان من أشد المعجبين بنزار، فكنت أتابع كل فيديوهاته من يوم يمكن من سنتين أو أكثر. فتعازينا الحارة إلى كل العائلة. وطبعا كمان إحنا بنعزي أنفسنا، لأنه بفقدان نزار فقدنا صوت حر قوي كان واقف ضد الظلم وضد غطرسة وعنجهية السلطة الفلسطينية. فتعازينا الحارة إلى، أرجو أن تنقل بشكل خاص إلى عائلتك، إلى والدك والدتك وإلى زوجة نزار وأبنائك. So let's go back to our topic. Much of what you were saying and your esteemed guest, Professor Edward, was saying about what should be done or how we can proceed from here with regard to the killing of Nizar Banat and the operation of freedom of speech and freedom of gathering, all these kind of human rights that are being deprived by the Palestinian Authority. It really lies on the shoulders of the Palestinian people, because we have a long extended experience with the EU, with the US, and with Israel with regard to forcing the BA to respect its own laws and especially the basic law that speaks about freedom of expression and freedom of assembly and all these kinds of basic human rights. Unfortunately, we are not confident that they would do much, because the role of the BA, as the Palestinians see it now clearly, maybe many years ago, not everybody could see what is the real role of Palestinian people, authority. It's to protect Israel's security. And our illegal president all the time calls for the sacred, he calls it, the sacred security coordination with Israel. And Nizar spoke a lot about this sacred security coordination with the Israelis, because this is how the BA is preventing Palestinians from fighting occupation in the West Bank. And as a matter of law, this is not new. You know, even at the time of Arafat, the late President Arafat, there were what they used to call at that time state security courts that put people into trial because they were a political opponent, and they were persecuting them. And even some of them were executed literally and killed by decisions of these courts. And the EU, the US at that time say nothing about it, until the Palestinian people raised their voices against it and started calling the EU, the international community, to stop these kinds of courts, and they were eventually stopped. As to the current situation with regard to the investigation committee that the BA have formed, a very simple thing. A young man or boy can tell you that this is illegal. How can you investigate something that you are accused of doing? So how can we trust a committee that's been formed by the BA itself, while the BA itself is being accused of killing Nizar? So what Ghassan said, that this committee dissolved itself by its members being withdrawn one by one, it lost also its legitimacy to be an honest and unbiased and fair committee that could come out with the results. Everybody was expecting the Minister of Justice to say something about what really happened. We didn't wait for that long to just come and hear our Minister of Justice to come and say, we conclude our investigation and we refer the report to the judicial system. This is not how it's done. People are waiting for the BA to tell its side of the story and to tell the people what really happened at the morning of the kidnapping and the killing of Nizar. And I don't think that we would hear anything from the BA. We have long experience with it. As Ghassan was saying, Nizar Banat was not the first or the last one to be killed the BA or inside the prisons of the BA. Maybe talking about remedies or talking about justice for these people that has been killed by the BA. I remember the first case, the killers inside the Junaid prison at that time, what they called the Marine Force of the BA, killed someone during their investigation with that guy. And what happened is that they held a trial and sentenced these people and put them in a jail in Jericho. And in fact, they were not jailed there. They were like, living their life. And it's like a facade. It's not a real punishment for these people who killed that man in Junaid prison in Nablus. So we don't expect as Palestinians very much of the BA with regard to the killing of Ghassan Banat, or even to what's happening nowadays, the suppression of people who are trying to assemble and say no to the oppression, no to the corruption. And the real thing that is happening is that we have a problem that might escalate into civil war, because we have the ruling party, the Fatah people, are siding with the BA, and this is like what makes people a little bit not afraid, but they don't want to go this path. They don't want to have a bloodshed between the brothers inside Palestine over this issue or any other issue. So things might escalate when it comes to a turning point or a boiling point. People would say, let's do it. We can't wait anymore. We can't wait any longer. we should say something, we should march, and the days will tell us what will happen. For example, tomorrow there is a call for a massive march after the prayer in Ramallah, from Abdel Nasser Mosque in Ramallah, that was called by an ex-Ramallah mayor, and he was also a member of the first Palestinian parliament, and he called for a march in which he asked people to raise the slogans of, asking for an investigation of the killing of Nizar Banat, asking for even a civil disobedience if they don't do justice to Nizar and to the others, and we will see how it goes from there.
What do you see the role of the international community as being? I mean, do you think that there is a role that can be played, or do you think this is an internal issue in order to by the Palestinian people to ensure that justice is done?
There is a big role, because the BA is a product of the Oslo Agreement that was concluded between the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and the State of Israel. And this accord was witnessed by the US and the whole international community, and what we have called now what they call it, the quartet, who are responsible over the negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And since this is a byproduct of their accord, they have to hold some responsibility on the actions of the BA. But the dilemma is that the BA in its current formation is a key role in protecting Israel. So you wouldn't find any other president like President Abbas, to be such determined to protect Israel. This is one of the issues, the real issues. It's not just the corruption. The corruption is a byproduct of this authority. The real issue is the occupation, and the BA not allowing people to free themselves from the occupation, and even like coinciding with the occupation and helping the occupation and arresting people and handing them to the Israeli authorities and all kinds of intelligence services inside Israel, the Shabak, and so on and so on. And even the political opponents from Hamas, from Jihad, from any other faction, if they are not handed to Israel, they are being kept held inside the Palestinian prisons. And for example, today, the Magistrate Court in Ramallah decided the release of one of the protesters who was beaten and imprisoned because he was participating in the march against what happened to Nizar. His name is Haytham Siaj. But unfortunately, the BA refused to execute the court's decision. And this is not the first one. For the last maybe decade or so, this has been the case. The courts, Palestinian courts, issue decisions releasing political opponents who are being held illegally in Palestinian prisons, and prison authorities and the security forces leaders decide not to release, not to abide by the court decisions. So I see very much paradox in these things, to ask the US and the EU to give us a hand and help in enforcing the Palestinian laws and forcing the Palestinian Authority to abide by international treaties that it is party to, and there are lots of them, lots of them, not the least the Convention Against Torture. So what Ghassan was suggesting, and what before that the late Nizar was suggesting, to cut off the aid, and this is might be a useful tool, and I think this is what hurt them the most, and this is maybe was one of the biggest motive against Nizar and the decision to kill Nizar.
Mm. I mean, that's, it's obviously a very big task to get the EU to cut off aid, but it's certainly something that might be achievable with the right amount of lobbying and pressure. But in terms of domestic legal remedies, you're a lawyer, you're there on the ground. What do you see as the best path to justice using the domestic framework?
You know, we have a very weak judicial system because in recent years, and especially last year, there have been like what they call laws by decrees issued by the President Mahmoud Abbas, because we have the parliament dissolved by President Abbas. So the only authority that is now issuing laws is the president himself. During last year, he issued so many decisions or laws by decisions that affected the judicial system. And we as lawyers, even at the Palestinian Bar Associations, went against these laws, and we had our protests, and we had our boycott of the courts for about a month, and we protested daily against these decisions because they are interfering in the work of the judicial system. So I really don't see that, although there are good judges and there are honest and fair judges that could deliver the justice for people, but unfortunately they are being influenced by the BA and affected by their tight grip on the judicial system. So unfortunately, I don't see that this could help a lot in this case. As I told you, just today, there was a sin by a magistrate court to release one of the protesters, and it was not enforced. So it's a little bit hopeless case with our judicial system.
Well, I have to say that it's very frank.
Even to say more, even like, you know, maybe 2 months ago, President Abbas's decree canceling all the elections or postponing all the elections of all the professional associations in Palestine, including the Palestinian Bar Association. So we were banned from holding our elections, which was supposed to be on 1st of May this year. And they banned us, and they make it illegal to do these elections, and postponing for at least 6 months at the first time. And you can see this, they are trying to get hold of everything and control everything. And they will not allow any other party or other political body to replace them through free elections. That's why they canceled the elections. It's not over the issue of Jerusalem, because you could hold the elections in Jerusalem despite the Israeli occupation objection of that election. But they don't want to to relinquish their authority in Palestine.
Well, I mean, it is a very frank, if rather depressing, if I may say so, analysis. And so I hope that you know, obviously I hope that you're wrong, and I also hope that there are external mechanisms which can be brought to bear. But we shall see. I'm just going to say to everyone who's watching at the moment, if there are any questions, now is the time to ask them. We have the chat box, which you can all see, I hope. And so if you do have questions, please put them in the chat box now. What I would say once again to Ghassan is thank you for taking the time to address us this evening. And I know that we all who are watching extend our condolences to you and your family for this absolutely awful, tragic event. As I was saying a few moments ago, if there are questions, please pose them now. I want to thank the Arab Organization for Human Rights once again for organizing this. And I also want to thank our other speakers for taking the time to give their contributions, because I really do genuinely hope that there is a resolution to this and that there can be some measure of justice. Although I'm sure that it will be difficult to get to. Events are still unfolding, and certainly, as Edward said a few minutes ago, it will be interesting to see whether or not the PA do release the report that they undoubtedly already have. I don't think we do have any more questions. So what I'm going to do is just wrap things up and say thank you to everyone for coming along this evening. Thanks to our participants. I suspect, as ever, the Arab Organization for Human Rights will provide a transcript. What I should say, actually, there is a last-minute question which has been posed, which is why hasn't the EU applied any sanctions on the PA? And if I can pass that out, Wael, to you for the time being. Do you think that there is going to be an appetite from the EU to step in light of these events?
I think we need to work on that. If the Palestinian people here in the West Bank insist on demanding for justice for Nizar Banat and go on marching and keep on protesting this thing, I think the EU then would have to and do the job.
Yeah, I mean,
it all relies on our shoulders now.
Yeah, I think that's right. But it seems to me that any state-sponsored killing, assassination is a horrific, egregious event. But there is something in particular about this, and not only about the brutal, foul way in which it appears to have been carried out. It's not just that; it's because it came on the back of calls to end corruption and a call for, effectively, for international assistance. So I hope that there will be particular resonance as a result of, if something good can come of this, I hope that it is that. There is another question which has just come in, which I'm not sure is quite on point. But thank you for the question nonetheless. I think what we'll do is we will leave it there. Thanks once again to everyone for participating, and I hope, as I say, that there is some measure of justice for the Banat family at some point soon. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.